Hi, rodafleming in the sunny Philippines here, and boy is it hot. Summer is technically over, but we're still looking at temperatures of the high 30s into the 40s, and it's pretty extreme. However, be that as it may, I hope you're all well. Thank you very much for all of those who are helping us. So I'm still working on trying to get that easier for you. I'm going to add some more tiers to my Patreon. I'm told this will help. It all takes time, and I still have to produce videos and think about them, write them. So, I could really do with a secretary. Gosh, that would be great. Then I could just do what I do, which is write, write and take pictures. Anyway, I can't do that. So today I want to talk about one of those nasty little misconceptions that's running around, has been running around for a while, and it's one that we really need to look at. And that is the idea that biological sex is not real. And I'm going to look at an article which was in the Scientific American, incredibly. The trouble is, the number of people that it doesn't apply to is absolutely tiny. They're very, very small. And, it's quite difficult to get sensible estimates of this. They seem to range, on average, around about the 1 in 20,000 births would be affected by some kind of genetic abnormality, which gives rise to a genetic intersex condition. Okay, 1 in 20,000 births. Now, what you have to understand is that statistically, that's not enough to count, right? You can't use it. Now, I'm going to quote from this article. This article was actually published a couple of years ago, and either I noted it and didn't do anything about it, or I didn't notice it. It was in Scientific American, and I have to admit I don't always read Scientific American, although I regularly do. And this is called "Stop Using Phony Science to Justify Transphobia." And then it says, and here's the real beller, actual research shows that sex is anything but binary. And this is by a person called Simon, brackets E, so Simon or Simone, D. Sun. And it says here, yes, everybody in the middle school biology learned that XX chromosomes if you're female, your XY if you're male. And this is true. For something like 99.99% of us, this holds true. And any exceptions cannot be held as a standard. They're just exceptions. It's as simple as that. You're an exception. It doesn't mean that any such exceptions apply to other people. Now, the person then goes on to say that biological sex is far more complicated than XX or XY, or just XX, or just XXY, or just X. Well, all of these combinations appear. You also get XYY and you get XXY. Now, this person then presumes on your ignorance further to talk about the SRY gene. Now, the SRY gene is basically an androgen receptor, right? And boys have it, males have it rather, but females don't. And what can happen in some conditions, a good one would be androgen insensitivity syndrome, is that the SRY gene is non-functional, doesn't work. So what happens is you get a person who's got an XY chromosomal profile, but because the androgens that are released under the effect of the XY genes have no effect because the receptor is not working, they grow up as women. And these can be either partial or complete, and we call them either PAIS, partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, or complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. And the fact is that for CAIS, finding out that they're CIS can be extremely traumatic. I mean, they've grown up all their lives being women. There's a higher proportion of them who are attracted to other women than is normal amongst women. But they just think they're lesbians, if that's the case. Most of them, most who are discovered, are actually discovered as part of fertility treatment. They're married and they want to have babies with their husband, and they've been trying and they can't get pregnant. And they go, why can't we get pregnant? And then the next thing that happens is that tests are done. These would usually be ultrasonics and blood tests. Formerly it would just be blood tests, and now it's mainly on ultrasonics. And the ultrasonic operator is going to say to you, in no uncertain terms, I'm sorry, you don't have a womb. Because one of the things about CAIS is although they externally look exactly like women, they don't have women's internal organs. They have a functioning vagina, which is sensate and they get pleasure out of it, but isn't hooked up to anything. So they can't get pregnant. I mean, for some people that's an ideal case, apparently. Me, I like kids. Anyway, that is being used here in this ridiculous article as a way of saying, well, you know, the XXXY doesn't work. Well, it does work. We've just explained why in a very small number of cases, you know, a tiny number of cases, it doesn't work, but it's for a known reason. That doesn't mean there's no binary. It means that the binary breaks down under certain circumstances. And I'm quoting from this article at length because these lies are the kind of lies you're going to hear all the time when people are talking about transgender. You know, and transgender is that, it's become that thing that you're not allowed to talk about. Well, fuck that. Just screw that, because we're going to have to talk about that. The brain, where stuff gets made up. And then it goes into a whole load of crap about how we can measure the sizes of brains and dee-da-dee-da-dee-dum. Certain brain characteristics can be sexually dimorphic, observable average differences across males and females. This is true. But pointing to brain sex is wrong, apparently, and it hinders scientific research. This is absolute crap. You know, we can actually tell the difference between a male and a female. It's actually not rocket science. We can tell, you know. It's not difficult. And they are very different. These are people, and I'm absolutely staggered, by the way. I'm shocked that a formerly reputable and actually illustrious publication like Scientific American would allow this to be published. I don't know if it was published in paper or it's just on its website. I'm just shocked that this has been published. It should never have been published. It's just lies. The sexually dimorphic nucleus of the preoptic area. And this is SDNPOA. And they like to throw in these little acronyms because they know it confuses you. This is slightly larger in males than in females. Yes, we know that. And the reason is, in terms of evolutionary biology, is that males are the hunters. So we have a slightly more developed visual complex than females do. It's not that it's better. We know that females are better at sorting, for example. They're much better at examining differences, you know. I tell you something, I'll give you an example, because, you know, a long time ago when I was, I don't know, I think I was probably about 21. I was working on a farm, and we were lifting potatoes, you know, picking up the ties. I was notionally, you know, this was my job, I was just helping out, you know. And the machine, which was called a Grim Gazelle, apparently, it was actually, would go through up the tatty rows, and it would pick up the potatoes, but it would also pick up loads of stone, because this was Exmoor, and it's a very stony place, you know. So we had to get the stones out before the potatoes went to the bags. And so this would come up a long travelling table, which was vibrating, and there were sort of slats there, you know, and it was kind of like a netting table, so all the you know, the earth and the dirt falls down. And what you're left on top of is the potatoes and the stones. And we had 2 or 3 local women who were lovely, you know, but real country girls, you know. And they were amazing. They were so good at spotting, you know, the stone, potato. And, you know, me doing it, it's like I miss half of them. And they would just say, you know, men can't do this kind of work. And although that sounds terribly like a cliche, it's actually true. Because there are differences in the visual complexes of men and women. Men, for example, see movement much more quickly than women do. We see it instantly, and that's because we're hunters. This person then goes on to say that because these are very small differences, and they are, on average, you know, you'll get women, females with, you know, a larger such area than men. We have to talk about averages here. When we're talking about averages, we find that on average, there's a difference. It's the same as when you look at women, female athletes. If you look at female athletes, well, the first thing to notice is to look at their hips and their bottoms. And you'll see that they basically have very masculine frames. They have very slender, boxy hips, much more like a boy's hips. They tend to have quite broad shoulders and long arms. That's what makes a good runner. And long legs, obviously. That makes them good runners. And that you'll see that if you look at any female runner who's good, then she'll follow this kind of stereotype of the narrow hips, the broad shoulders, the long arms, and she can really move. But it's because she's more like a man. These are not absolutes. There's nothing absolute in science. It's just averages. And of course, it's easy to see the sexual dimorphisms and conclude that the brain is binary. Get away, because it bloody well is. She quotes, the studies that are quoted are completely out of date. They quote like Zhu, 1996. I mean, nobody takes Zhu seriously anymore. It was interesting at the time. Now we know it's not relevant. Body and the brain and the hormones betwixt. Now, there is no difference, none whatsoever, between a male fetus and a female fetus until sex hormones start to have an effect. All of the dimorphic differences that do exist between males and females, men and women, are the result of sex hormones. If you don't have sex hormones, or as we've seen already, if you're not responsive to them, they won't change. You will be effectively you will be a female, because it's the male that's shifted. Testosterone moves the male much more than the absence of, or estrogen rather, moves the female. Estrogen will obviously cause some body dimorphism, but it's radically noticeable that men change very much in that critical period between about 14 and 17 to 18. And they move from being boys to being young men, and it's really quite remarkable. Whereas for girls, it's really not so marked. I mean, okay, yes, they do fill out, they do get the hips, but it's not the same. It's not as marked. All humans possess levels of estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, with sex difference not as prominent as is popularly thought. But it's nonsense. Yes, all males have a level of estrogen, and all females have a level of testosterone. So what? They're still evidently male and female. Furthermore, measurements of hormone levels in any one individual wildly vary across the range of average values. Yes, because they're individuals. We look at the averages exactly for that reason, because you can't tell just by looking at individuals. Not when you're doing this kind of work. I mean, it's like, by and large, for example, we can look at AGP and HSTS, certainly here in Asia, and you can say right away, that one's AGP and that one's HSTS, AGP, HSTS, HSTS. You can just do it. You just look and you can do it. It's easy. When we're talking about scientific research, we don't do that kind of thing, We try to be just a tad more sophisticated in our methodology, sort of. And you should be bloody glad that people are a bit more sophisticated in their methodology, by the way. Otherwise, a lot more of you would be dead. And that's my, having once worked in the pharmaceutical industry, that's that side of it coming out in me, because, they get a hell of a hard time. And yet they keep an awful lot of people alive. The binary sex model is not predictive. Well, yes, actually it is predictive in much more than 99.9% of cases. Yeah, I know, we accept there's a tiny minority, 0.1 or something, for whom this doesn't apply. But that is not how science works. Science takes the consensus, the average. And then they go on to say, let me see, the science is clear and conclusive. Sex is not binary and transgender people are real. Well, actually, sex is binary. But that has nothing to do with whether or not there is such a phenomenon as transgender people. These are not related. If you're talking about brain changes and anomalies in sex hormone production, then you must presumably be talking about what we call HSTS, that's sexual inverts. Those are people who have, for various reasons, that's what she's describing, effects in the womb that cause changes in adult life. That does not explain thousands of adolescent girls going to clinics to get their boobs cut off. It doesn't. It has nothing to do with it. Sexual inversion is a particular case. It is real, and it does lead to transsexualism, not transgender, but transsexualism. When we look at AGP, there are other reasons why that is caused. And in fact, autism, ASD, as I said the other day, is becoming more and more, the usual suspect, the likely suspect. And the usual nonsense. Environmental, social, and behavioural factors also influence hormones in both males and females. So what? It doesn't matter. These influences are peripheral. They're tiny. They have no fundamental effect at all. And to try and elevate their importance to this is completely disingenuous. It's a lie. This person is lying. Most of us are XX or XY, right? And that means most of us are male or female. Now, there are a number of people, yes, who have anomalies. There are sexual inverts, like Sam, who has all of the characteristics and appearance of a woman, but technically she's male. So we can assume that she has some, at least, level of androgen insensitivity, or perhaps that variation in testosterone delivery in utero caused this effect. Then we can look at others like AGP, autogynephilic men, and we can say, well, in this particular case, we have a psychological condition which might possibly be influenced by something deeper, and something like autism, but this doesn't apply to most people, right? And this person is trying to tell you that, your ideas of sex and gender are nonsense by using a whole load of flannel and nonsense herself or himself, whatever he is. This is lies. These are all lies. There are males and females. I absolutely adore HSTS trans women, and there's quite a few AGPs who are very nice too. I love it. But, that's me. I'm a special case. These things don't actually matter that much. I'm not saying trans people don't matter. Of course they matter. They matter as much as anybody else does. But to try and construct a case saying that the general understanding of science, which is that there are two sexes and they're fixed for life, is somehow wrong. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, and you should not give it any credence. When you come across it, please shout it down. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.